So we have what percent of 64 is 16? And we're just going to go ahead and put our signs for of with multiplication, bring down your numbers, is saying equal, and since we don't know the percent, that's going to be our variable. So you have W times 64 equals 16, and we're just going to make this part pretty and actually do 64W equals 16. And next we need to isolate the variable by dividing both sides by 64. 64 divided by 64 is 1, and 1 times W is just W. Then we divide 16 by 64, and this is the problem that we're going to have to work out off to the side. So our first step with our division is bring your decimal point straight up. 64 can't go into 16, so we're going to put a 0 placeholder there. 64 can go into 160 2 times. 64 times 2 is 128. Then we do our subtraction. 10 minus 8 is 2, 5 minus 2 is 3, and we bring down the 0. Then we have 64 goes into 325 times. 64 times 5 is 320, and we are done. Okay, 0.25 or 25 hundredths is our answer as a decimal. But if we look back to the beginning of the problem, it definitely asks for a percent of a number. So in order to change our decimal to a percent, we have to move our decimal point over 2 places to the right. So our actual percent is 25%. And just to be clear, moving something over 2 places to the right is the same as multiplying it by 100. Okay, just to recap, our first step is to rewrite the problem as an equation. So if we had what's percent of 98 is 19.6, we don't know the percent, so we're going to bring that down as a variable. Of is always multiplication, and bring your numbers down, and then is would be equal sign. We have 98W equals 19.6, and to get W by itself or isolate the variable, you divide both sides by 98. 98 divided by 98 is just 1, and 1 times W is W, and then we'll have to do this work off to the side. 98 goes into 19 0 times, but 98 goes into 19.6 2 times. 98 times 2 is 196, so that's our answer to our equation. The last step is the most important because at the beginning it asks what percent, so you have to make sure you change this decimal into a percent. If your question asks for a percent, you need to have a percentage, and that doesn't just mean you can put a percent sign after this decimal. You actually have to move the decimal point over 2 places to the right. So this is your decimal, 2/10 or 0.2. You're going to move it over 2 places to the right or multiply by 100 and put a percent sign in there. So that is actually 20%, and that's your final answer. For this one, we're going to work backwards, but in a different way. We have 12.8 is 32% of what number? The first step is to just bring down everything and make it math, use math language. So is will be equal, is will be equals, then we have 32%. Of is times, and then what number is going to be our variable? I'm just going to make that n. The problem with this one is we have a percent in the middle, and we have to make that percent into a regular number or a decimal. To make a percent into a decimal, if we have 32.0%, we move the decimal place over 2 places to the left. So that number is now 0.32 as a decimal. So we have, and this is really important that you don't forget to do this. Just make sure that percent gets changed into a decimal. And now you have a pretty equation. So this step right here is really important. Don't forget to change your percentage into a decimal before you move on, or your whole problem will be wrong. Now you can continue solving your equation. Divide both sides by 32 hundredths. to isolate your variable. You have n by itself, and now you have your problem that we have to solve off to the side, which is 12.8 divided by 32 hundredths, which is going to take some thinking. 12.8 will go into the box. 32 hundredths would be outside. We have a decimal in the divisor, so we have to take it out by multiplying it by 100 or moving the decimal point as many places over as you need. So we're going to make that now a 32. Since we moved it over 2 times in the divisor, you have to move it over 2 times in the dividend too. Even if there's not a digit there, we're going to put a 0 to hold a place. So now this number is 1,280. And we have a nice friendly division problem that we can solve now. 32 goes into 128 4 times. 32 times 4 is 128. Then you have to bring down this 0. 32 goes into 0 0 times, and you're done. So 40 is your number. Since you're not asking for a percent, they're asking for a number, you're done at this. The main thing you can't forget on this problem is this step right here, to change that into a decimal.